It started with her voice on the phone, tight and edged with something I couldn't place, like a fence wire pulled too taut. Lena. I was midway through unloading groceries in my cramped kitchen when the call came, rain already pattering against the window like impatient fingers. Eli, she said, and that one word carried the weight of a long day unraveling. I need help. Something stupid. My heart did its familiar thing, a bird fluttering wild in my chest, wings brushing ribs that suddenly felt too close. I'd spent years coaxing that bird to quiet when she was near, but it never listened. The pull hit me hard, that instinct to steady her, no matter the ask. In this small city, where streets blurred into one another and storms like this one locked everything down, options were thin. Salons shuttered early, roads slick and empty. What is it? I asked, already setting the bag down. My hair, she said, voice dropping. It's a mess, and with the layoff, I can't afford it right now. But I need it done. For a fresh start. Can you? My hands trembled just holding the phone, imagining the feel of scissors, the trust in her tilt of head. Yeah, I said. I'll come over. The drive through rain-slick streets led to her door, where everything felt heavier, the air thick with what we'd both been carrying. Rain drummed on the roof of my truck like a warning, steady and insistent, as I pulled up to her apartment building. The place was one of those low brick stacks on the edge of town, where the small city pressed in close, neighbors' lights flickering through wet windows. The kind of closeness that bred gossip, but hid real secrets. I cut the engine and sat for a beat, wipers slapping back and forth, blurring the glow from her second-floor unit. My pulse matched the rhythm, that bird in my chest settling into a low thrum. We've been friends for 2 years now, quiet ones, the sort built on shared walks through the overgrown parks that ringed this place. Paths lined with cracked sidewalks and stubborn weeds pushing through concrete, where we talk about nothing much. Weather, work shifts, the way the river smelled after rain. Never the undercurrents, the way I'd catch myself watching the line of her jaw when she laughed, or how her hands moved, calloused from her job at the warehouse before the layoff hit. I grabbed the bag from the passenger seat, scissors, comb, a cape I'd borrowed from a cousin who cut hair on weekends, and dashed through the downpour. Water soaked my boots by the time I reached the door, knocking sharp against the peeling paint. It opened slow, and there she was. Lena. Disheveled in a way that twisted something in me. Her hair hung tangled from neglect, dark strands clumping like they'd been wrestled by the wind and worry. Eyes shadowed, not just from lack of sleep, but that deeper fatigue, the kind that settles after too many closed doors. She wore an old flannel, sleeves rolled uneven, and her feet bare on the linoleum. Hey, she said, stepping aside, voice softer than the rain outside. I nodded, shaking water from my jacket, the scent of damp earth clinging to me. Looks like the storm's got us pinned, I said, trying for steady. She managed a half smile, closing the door behind me. The air inside was warmer, stale, with a faint trace of takeout and her soap. Something clean, like pine cutting through city grit. We stood there a moment in the narrow hall, the weight of her ask hanging between us. Thanks for this, she said, running a hand through her hair, wincing as it caught. The layoff, it's been 3 weeks. Money's tight, and I have this interview next Monday. Virtual, but still. I look like I've been hiding in a cave. Her voice cracked just a little, and I felt that pull again. The role I'd carved out as the steady one. The friend who fixed things, leaky faucets on those park walks when she'd mentioned a drip at home, or the time I helped her haul boxes after a bad rental. But this was different. Cutting her hair meant standing close, seeing the curve of her neck, the trust in letting me hold the blades. My hidden longing cracked at the edges, that ache I'd buried under layers of casual talks and safe distance. In this small city, everyone knew too much. Your job loss spreads like the river in flood season, but saw nothing of the real currents, the unspoken wants that ran beneath. She led me to the living room, cluttered with job applications scattered on the coffee table, a half-empty mug beside them. The space felt smaller tonight, walls pressing in with the storm's howl outside. I figured the bathroom, she said, gesturing down the hall. Better light. I set the bag on the table, unzipping it slow, fingers brushing the cool metal of the scissors. They glinted under the lamp, sharp and promising. Lena hovered, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. You sure you're okay with this? I mean, I've watched enough tutorials, I said, forcing a lightness, and you're not trusting me with your life. But inside, the tension built, my steady facade thinning. Those walks in the parks, they'd been my anchor, moments where I could be near without saying too much. Now, this, her vulnerability laid bare, and mine threatening to spill. We moved to the kitchen first, her suggesting tea to ease the nerves. The light there was harsh, casting long shadows across the counters, worn from years of solitary meals. She filled the kettle one-handed, her movements deliberate, like she was measuring each step. I unpacked the tools, laying them out, comb with teeth worn smooth, spray bottle for dampening, towel folded neat. The scissors felt heavy in my palm, their weight a reminder of the line we were about to cross. "It's just hair," she said, as if reading my mind. But her eyes flicked to mine, shadowed and searching. In the city, fresh starts were hard-won. The isolation not just from storms, but from eyes that judged without understanding. Her layoff had rippled out. Whispers at the grocery, pitying nods. But no one saw the woman beneath. The one who'd shared quiet benches with me, laughing at ducks fighting over breadcrumbs. As the kettle whistled, steam rising like a veil, I felt the birds stir again. My role as friend was cracking, longing seeping through the fissures. I wanted to tell her then, about the walks that lingered in my thoughts, the way her presence filled the empty spaces of this town. But I poured the tea instead, hands steady for now. Inside, the kitchen light cast long shadows as we prepared the tools, the real work waiting just beyond. We carried the tools down the hall, the floorboards creaking under our steps like they were settling into the weight of the moment. The bathroom was cramped, a narrow space squeezed between bedroom and closet, walls tiled in faded white that caught the fluorescent light overhead. It buzzed faintly, casting a cool glow that made everything feel exposed. Lena had showered just before I arrived, she said, to make it easier. Steam still lingered in the air, heavy and warm, clinging to the mirror like a half-forgotten breath. It carried her scent, clean and sharp, cutting through the damp chill from the storm outside. I set the bag on the sink edge, the porcelain cool under my fingers. Scissors first, sharp, stainless steel that caught the light in a quick flash. Then the comb, wide-toothed and black, its handle worn smooth from use. I shook out the towel, a plain gray one she'd handed me, and draped it over her shoulders later. But for now, I spread it on the floor beneath the stool she'd dragged in. A rickety wooden thing from the kitchen, its legs scraping tile as we positioned it. Everything felt deliberate, like readying ground for planting after a hard freeze. My hands moved on autopilot, but inside, that bird stirred again, wings brushing against the cage of my ribs. Lena watched from the doorway, arms loose at her sides now, her flannel untucked. "You don't have to be so careful," she said, but her voice held a thread of uncertainty. I nodded, spritzing the spray bottle to test it, a fine mist hanging in the steam. The air thickened with it, mixing shampoo's faint herbal edge with the rain-soaked city that seeped through the vent. She stepped in then, the space shrinking around us, and lowered herself onto the stool. Her posture settled with trust, shoulders easing down, head tilting slightly forward, the neck exposed under that light, pale skin curving to the base of her skull, a few fine hairs escaping the tangle. Vulnerable, like the soft underbelly of a horse after a long ride. I swallowed, standing behind her, close enough to feel the warmth rising from her. I'd watched her hands before, on those park walks, how they gestured broad when she talked about the warehouse shifts, calluses rough from lifting crates. Strong, capable, always moving with purpose. Now, mine were the ones reaching, comb in one, scissors in the other. The shift twisted something in me, a quiet inversion. My fingers parted her hair first, sections dark and thick, damp from the shower. It felt alive under my touch, resilient strands slipping like river grass in current. I combed through slow, untangling knots with care, each pass loosening more than just the mess. Her breathing evened, a soft rhythm in the steam-filled quiet. The mirror fogged at the edges, but I avoided it, focusing on the part line forming under my comb. First snip came hesitant, blades closing with a crisp shear that echoed off the tiles. Rhythm built from there, like clearing underbrush after winter. Steady cuts through overgrown tension, each one shedding weight. Strands fell soft to the towel, dark curls piling like fallen leaves. I worked the back first, layering even, the scissors gliding close to her nape. Her head stayed still, trust in the posture, but I felt the subtle shift when metal brushed skin. A small flinch, shoulders tensing just a fraction. "Sorry," I whispered, too close, my breath stirring a loose strand. The apology hung there, warm against her ear. She shook her head, barely, voice muffled. "It's fine. Cold, that's all." But the air between us warmed anyway, the steam wrapping tighter. Another snip, deeper now, and her scent grew sharper, shampoo's pine mingling with the salt of city rain still clinging to her skin from earlier. It filled my lungs with each breath, grounding and heady, like walking trails after a downpour. My hands steadied into the work, fingers brushing her scalp, accidental at times, electric threads pulling at the ache I'd kept buried. The bird quieted to a flutter, focused on the task, but awareness bloomed slow. Her neck's curve, the way light hollowed the dip at her collar. I'd never been this near, not like this. Roles reversed from our walks where I'd trail a step behind, content with distance. Sections fell heavier now, the pile on the towel growing, each cut lightening her frame. I angled the comb, shaping the line, blades whispering through. A flinch again at a closer trim, metal grazing ear. "Easy," I murmured, apology softer, leaning in to adjust. My chest brushed her shoulder brief, a spark that lingered. She exhaled, relaxing into it, and the scent intensified. Rain-washed skin under herbal clean. The small bathroom held us suspended, storm muffled outside, just the snip and our breaths, sinking uneven. As more sections fell to the floor, curling dark against gray towel, her voice broke the rhythm, low. Conversation turned to her hidden frustrations, words spilling like the hair. Job hunts gone cold, the city's grip tightening after the layoff. I listened, scissors pausing mid-cut, the weight of it all settling heavier than the steam. She started with the warehouse, voice low and measured, threading through the steady snip of scissors as I worked the sides now, angling her head gentle with my free hand. "It's not just the money," Lena said, eyes fixed on the floor where strands piled like discarded thoughts. "It's the way the city chews you up. Long shifts, hauling boxes, backs aching by noon, and for what? A paycheck that barely covers rent in the shoebox." The blades closed again, a crisp shear that punctuated her words, but I felt them land deeper, each one tugging at the quiet ache in my chest. I'd nod, responses coming measured, like, "That sounds rough," or, "You've got skills they can't ignore." Keeping my tone even, the anchor she'd come to expect. But inside, her frustrations pulled harder, unraveling threads I'd woven tight around my own feelings. The layoff wasn't just numbers on a slip. It was her pride cracking. The competent woman I'd watched navigate park paths, now adrift in the urban current. I combed a section forward, damp strands parting under the teeth, and snipped close to her temple. The closeness intensified then, my fingers brushing her nape accidental as I studied the comb. Skin warm and soft, a jolt electric that shot up my arm. She didn't pull away, just continued, voice dropping softer over the rhythm. And the interviews? They stare at your resume like it's a puzzle they don't want to solve. Overqualified, they say. But what they mean is, not from here, not one of us. Her words hung in the steam, mixing with the herbal scent clinging to her hair, and I murmured agreement, hiding how each confession mirrored my own isolation. In this small city, pressures built like the river against concrete. Job hunts stalling in the same loops, faces at counters recognizing you but never truly seeing. My chest tightened, the ache sharpening as her voice wove through the cuts, pulling me closer without touch. Another brush of fingers, this time deliberate in adjusting a stray lock. Electric again, but lingering. Warmth radiating from her skin to my knuckles. I paused the scissors midair, letting the moment settle. And that's when the memory surfaced, unbidden like a weed through pavement. Our first meeting, 2 years back at that corner coffee shop on Elm, the one with mismatched chairs and windows fogged from steam. I'd been sketching on a napkin, lines rough for a freelance gig, when she slid into the seat across, spilling her mug just enough to splash my page. "Shit, sorry," she'd said, grabbing napkins, her hands quick and sure even then, calluses catching the light. Apologies tumbled, but our eyes met, hers dark and startled, mine caught in the spark that flickered unspoken. We laughed it off, shared a refill, talked about the shop's bad brew masking the city's grind. Sparks ignored, buried under just friends. But they smoldered, fueling those later walks where I'd lag a step, watching her stride ahead, hands in pockets against the chill. Back in the bathroom, the snip resumed. Layers building uneven at first. I nicked a bit too short near her ear, a chunk falling crooked to the towel. Lena caught it in the mirror's edge, twisting her head, and let out a laugh, sharp and brief, breaking the heavy air like sun through clouds. "Well, that's one way to keep it interesting," she said, the sound lightening her shadowed eyes for a beat. I chuckled too, low, adjusting with smaller cuts, the laughter easing the tension but not the pull. Her neck arched slight as she settled back, trusting the fix, and my fingers grazed again, electric warmth spreading. The ache in my chest swelled, want to linger rising sharp, trace that curve, let the comb rest longer, but fear clamped down, the line between friend and more a blade's edge. Crossing it could sever everything, those park paths emptying without her voice beside. She shifted then, voice delving deeper into the city's grip. "It's like the streets close in after dark, everyone rushing home to their own walls. No room for anything real." Her words trailed, heavy with the unsaid, and I responded careful. "This place tests you, but it doesn't break everyone." Hiding the throb, how her nearness tested me most, fingers brushing nape once more as I layered the crown. Electric, insistent, the contact pulling at buried longing. The flashback lingered too, coffee shop sparks we'd doused, now flickering in this steam. Another laugh bubbled when I overtrimmed a fringe, her head tilting playful. "At least it's not a mullet," she quipped. The lightness fracturing the weight, but my conflict sharpened. Desire to pause the scissors, to let hands stay, warring with the fear of her pulling back forever. Snips continued, rhythm steadying the layers, her stories flowing low. Bosses who'd overlooked her, shifts that blurred into nights alone. My replies stayed measured, voice even over the blades, but each word from her yanked at the ache, chest tight like wire. Fingers brushed again, accidental electric at her nape, warmth seeping through. The first meeting echoed, unspoken sparks now crackling here. Her laughter at my fumbled cut broke through once more, air lightning brief, but internal storm raged. Linger or cut clean? Fear honed the edge, line too sharp to cross. The mirror's clear patch caught her gaze then, reflection pulling us into deeper silence, words fading as eyes met in the glass. The silence stretched, heavy in the steam, her gaze holding mine through the mirror's cleared spot, dark eyes pulling like the river's undertow. I broke it first, turning back to the work, comb parting the top layers now, fingers steadying her head with one palm against her temple. Warmth radiated through, skin soft under the calluses I'd earned from odd jobs around town, fixing fences in the outskirts parks, hauling scrap for cash. Her head tilted easy into the hold, trust deepening the quiet. And I shaped the layers slow, scissors gliding in even arcs, trimming the crown to fall just right. Each cut felt like pruning branches after a storm, revealing the stronger lines beneath. But the heat from her seeped into my hand, steady and insistent, blurring the task into something more. She shifted then, voice emerging low from the depths we'd skirted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever leave this place," she said, words tumbling softer now, doubts threading through the snip. "The small city's got its hooks in, cheap rent, familiar streets, but it makes you feel unseen, like you're just another shadow moving through the crowds at the market." Her confessions deepened, spilling out as I worked the sides again, blades closing, crisp near her cheek. I felt them land, each one echoing my own buried questions, the way this town wrapped tight but left you hollow. "Unseen," she repeated, almost to herself, head steady under my hand. The warmth spread, her pulse faint through the skin, and I murmured, "It's hard to stand out here," keeping my voice even, but the ache stirred, her vulnerability cracking my guard. My own truth slipped then, guarded ones I had held back on those park walks, words escaping quiet over the rhythm. "I know that loneliness," I said, combing a front section forward, snip following close. "Crowds at the bus stop, faces blurring, but you're always watching from afar, wondering if anyone sees the real you." It came out rawer than planned, the admission hanging in the steam like mist off the river. I'd watched her, yes, from benches during our strolls, her stride cutting through the weeds, hands gesturing broad against the skyline. Not just as friend, but with that pull, the bird in my chest noting every shift. She didn't turn, but her breathing hitched slight, the mirror catching the flicker in her eyes. The shaping continued, layers evening out, my hand steadying her jaw now, warmth flooding deeper, electric under the surface. Tension mounted with a loose strand then, one that curled stubborn near her ear, escaping the comb's teeth. I set the scissors down, fingers tracing to tuck it away, slow, deliberate, brushing the shell of her ear, skin flushing warm under my touch. The contact lingered, accidental turned intent, a spark that pulled the air taut. She leans back into it, body language shifting subtle, shoulders easing against my stance, her head resting light against my abdomen. Breath synced with mine, shallow and even. The steam wrapping us closer. Scents mingling. Her pine shampoo with the faint salt of sweat from the day's worry. My heart thudded low, matching the rhythm. Fingers pausing in her hair, the tuck forgotten. The small bathroom shrank further, walls pressing like the city's edges. But here, in this act, boundaries blurred. Another layer shaped, scissors resuming hesitant, but her lean held, warmth radiating steady through flannel and skin. Confessions wove on, hers about nights staring at the ceiling, feeling the town's weight unseen. Mine slipping more. Loneliness not just in crowds, but in the spaces beside her, watching without reaching. I've been there, I whispered, blades closing soft. Afar, but close enough to feel it. The truths stripped us. Words peeling back like the hair falling to the towel, exposing the raw need beneath. Not just for jobs or fresh starts, but for seeing. For being seen, in the quiet currents we both navigated. Her breath sinked deeper, lean pressing firmer, and realization hit sharp. This wasn't just cutting hair. It stripped more, layers of pretense falling with each snip, revealing the want we'd both carried, unspoken in the small city shadows. Fingers traced another stray, tension coiling tight as she leaned further, body yielding to the touch, breaths mingling in the humid air. The act exposed it all, her need to be held steady, mine to provide more than friendship, the raw pull beneath the routine. Scissors worked the final side, shaping precise, but the warmth, the sink, the truths, they unraveled everything. Her doubts about staying echoed my fears of losing this nearness, unseen in the crowds but vivid here. The loose strand tucked again, fingers lingering, electric and undeniable. Final cuts done, the last strand falling soft to the pile, but neither moved. Air thick with unspoken pull, her lean holding, my hand still in her hair. The mirror forgotten as silence deepened. I stepped back then, scissors set aside with a soft clink on the sink, the sound cutting through the thick quiet like a pebble in still water. Her hair fell, even now. Layers shaped rough but true, catching the fluorescent light in soft waves that framed her face. The towel below was a mess of dark curls, scattered like thoughts we'd let loose. "All right," I said, voice low, almost lost in the steam. "Let's see it." My hands hovered, unsure, but I reached for her shoulders, turning her gentle toward the small bathroom mirror. The glass had cleared more in the warmth, edges still fogged, but center sharp, ready to reflect the change. She twisted on the stool, slow, her body unfolding from that lean against me, the absence of her weight hitting like a cool draft through an open door. But she didn't look at the mirror. Her eyes met mine instead, dark and steady in the close space, pulling me in like the undertow of the river after rain. There I was, reflected not in glass but in her gaze, vulnerability mirrored back, my own guarded want staring plain from those depths. The lines around my eyes, the tension in my jaw, all laid bare in how she saw me, unflinching and raw. It twisted something deep, that recognition, like catching your shadow in a puddle after a storm, distorted but true. Her head tilted slight, still under my lingering touch, and the steam wrapped us tighter, sense of pine and damp skin holding the moment suspended. I'd never seen myself like this, not in the parks or coffee shop glances, but here, in her eyes, stripped to the bone. Her hand rose then, tentative, fingers brushing mine where they rested in her hair. The grip came firm after, callous tips pressing into my knuckles, warm and anchoring. Skin against skin, rough from her warehouse days, now soft in intent, sending a jolt up my arm that settled heavy in my chest. She held there, thumb tracing a slow circle, the touch speaking louder than words in the humid quiet. My breath caught, the bird in my ribs gone still, replaced by a thudding that echoed the distant rain on the window. "Eli," she whispered, voice cracking just at the edges, like fence wire giving way. "I've always noticed. The way you watch during our walks, steady but holding back. I've wanted more for so long." The admission hung, simple and heavy, pulling the air taut between us. Her eyes didn't waver, dark pools reflecting my surprise, my own hidden longing blooming plain. My heart thudded like distant thunder rolling in from the city's edge, low and building, shaking the careful walls I'd built around this friendship. Years of quiet steps beside her, hands in pockets to keep from reaching, now crumbling in that shared look. The steam thickened, mirror forgotten, just her gaze holding mine. Vulnerability mirrored deep. Her need to be seen, mine to be the one seen. Fingers tightened in her hair, mine responding to her grip, the contact electric and inevitable. The small bathroom shrank to this point, walls pressing close like the town's whispers, but here, in her eyes, we were alone, raw edges touching. She leaned in slow, breath mingling warm in the space between, herbal scent wrapping with the salt of her skin. My hand slipped to her cheek, thumb brushing the line of her jaw, rough stubble from the day catching light. The boundary dissolved then, quiet and sure, no rush, just the pull we'd ignored too long. Her lips met mine soft, tentative at first, tasting of tea and the faint bitterness of worry. I pressed back, heart thudding harder, the kiss deepening like roots finding soil after drought. Her free hand rose to my neck, fingers threading into my hair, mirroring the act, pulling me closer. The steam clung to us, damp and warm, as mouths moved slow, exploring the shape of what we'd held back. Soft pressure, giving to hunger, breaths sinking ragged. It wasn't frantic, no storm breaking wild, but inevitable, like the river carving stone over years. Her lips parted slight, a quiet sound escaping, and I answered with my own, hand cupping her face, feeling the pulse jump under my palm. The kiss sealed it, tongues brushing hesitant, then sure. The world narrowing to this. Her taste, her warmth, the way her body leaned full into mine now, stool creaking under the shift. Vulnerability poured through, mirrored in every touch, the admission still echoing in my chest. Thunder rolled closer outside, matching the thud, but we stayed locked, boundary gone, raw need met in the quiet steam. When we pulled apart, breaths coming short, her eyes opened to mine again, shining with something new. Relief, maybe, where the same ache resolved. Hands lingered, hers on my neck, mine in her hair, the mirror catching our edges now, two silhouettes blurred at the borders. The fragile aftermath settled, air still thick but lighter, the pull unspoken no more. Her forehead rested against mine brief, a sigh escaping, leading us into what came next, uncertain but held. We pulled back from the kiss, both of us breathless, the air in the small bathroom still thick with steam and the faint herbal trace of her shampoo. My hands lingered on her shoulders, fingers pressing light into the flannel, feeling the warmth of her beneath, steady now where it had trembled before. Her eyes stayed open, dark and searching mine, a flush creeping up her neck that matched the heat in my chest. The bird there had settled, not gone but quiet, wings folded after the storm. She exhaled slow, her good hand, wait, no, both free now, sliding from my neck to rest against my arm, grip loose but holding. The stool creaked under her as she shifted, the towel slipping a fraction, but neither of us moved to fix it. The mirror caught our edges, blurred silhouettes leaning close, the fluorescent light buzzing soft overhead like a distant hum. Her words tumbled out first, voice rough from the kiss, low and unfiltered in the humid quiet. "I thought it was one-sided," she said, eyes dropping to the clippings on the floor, dark curls scattered like shed worries. All this time, in this city, it taught me to hide. Keep feelings locked behind closed doors, like everyone else. Job hunts, neighbors nodding but never asking real questions. It builds walls. I figured you saw me as just the friend. Steady Lena who doesn't need more. She paused, thumb tracing my wrist again, the callus rough against my skin, grounding the confession. I felt it land, her vulnerability mirroring the one I'd carried. The small city's isolation, not just streets, but the spaces between people, where wants went unspoken to avoid the flood of judgment. Her breath steadied, but the words kept coming, spilling like rain off a roof after the downpour eases. Those walks in the parks, I'd catch you looking, but I told myself it was nothing. Safer that way. Easier to stay hidden. I nodded, my confession rising then, words slipping past the guard I'd kept so tight. Years of quiet watching, I said, voice matching hers, low against the tile walls. From the benches, during our talks about nothing. Fearing if I said it, I'd lose this fragile bond, the one thing that made this place bearable. My fingers tightened on her shoulders, feeling the muscles shift under flannel, the reality of her nearness sinking in. I had watched her hands on those paths, gesturing at the river's bend or the weeds pushing through cracks, strong and sure, and wondered what it would feel like to hold them. The fear had been sharp, like a blade's edge in my pocket, ready to cut the line we'd walked so carefully. In the city's confines, bonds like ours were rare, threads woven from shared silences, not grand declarations. Losing it would leave me adrift, parks empty without her stride beside. We sat like that a moment, her hand still on my arm, the steam cooling slow around us. Then she glanced down, at the hair clippings on the floor, dark against the gray towel, like shed skin after a long haul. Look at that mess, she said, a half smile breaking through, voice lighter now. But it feels right, like this cut. Rough around the edges, but a fresh start. For both of us, maybe. I followed her gaze, the pile a tangible mark of the change. Strands curling loose where they'd been tangled tight. The symbolism hit clear then, in the small city's grip where fresh starts came slow, fought for like clearing overgrowth from a trail. Her layoff had stripped the old layers, job worries piling like those clippings. But this act, my hands in her hair, the kiss sealing what simmered, shed something deeper. Our walls, built from urban isolation, the nods at markets that saw surfaces only. The new closeness grounded it, her shoulder warm under my palm, breath sinking again. Easy now. I squeezed her shoulder, resolving the initial fears that had knotted my gut on the drive over. We don't have to rush, I said, meeting her eyes, steady. This city tests, with its close streets and prying eyes, but we navigate it together, no more watching from afar. She nodded, hand sliding to cover mine, fingers lacing rough and sure, the promise settling like roots after rain. The fears eased, not gone, but shared now, the weight lighter between us. In this shoebox apartment, amid the storm's fading rumble, urban isolation felt less like a cage. We'd faced the job hunts, the whispers at the grocery, side by side. Her fresh cut a symbol, our bond the real trim, cutting away the excess to reveal what held. The evening deepened outside the narrow window, rain tapering to a drizzle, city lights flickering on through the wet glass. It pulled us toward an uncertain future, hands still intertwined, the fragile aftermath blooming into something solid. We moved from the bathroom then, her hand slipping from mine only to brush my arm as we stepped into the hall, the floor cool under bare feet and my still damp boots. The air felt lighter out here, steam fading behind us, but the warmth between us lingered, a quiet current pulling us to the living room. It was a small space, couch sagging against one wall, windows overlooking the street where city lights flickered on through the drizzle, casting wet glows on the pavement below. She sank onto the cushions first, patting the spot beside her, and I followed, the fabric rough under my palms. Her head found my shoulder natural, like it had always belonged there. Dark hair, newly cut, soft ends brushing my collar, settling against me. The weight was steady, not heavy, her breath evening out as the rain pattered faint on the glass. Outside, the small city's pulse hummed low. Distant car horns, a neighbor's door clicking shut, lights strung like beads along the blocks. In that lean, mutual realizations surfaced slow, words weaving through the quiet. I never thought it'd start like this, she murmured, voice muffled against my shirt, fingers tracing idle patterns on my knee. Not with scissors and steam, but something small. Care like that. Your hands steady when mine weren't. I nodded, arm curling around her, feeling the rise of her shoulder under my palm. Intimacy born from care, not grand gestures. That hit true. Like the way we'd shared those park walks, passing a thermos of coffee without fanfare, or how I'd linger after to help her lock up her bike. No fireworks, just the slow build of being there, seeing the cracks in the concrete and stepping over them together. Me neither, I said, voice low, thumb stroking her arm through flannel. Always figured it'd be some big moment, but this... It feels right. Real. Her hair caught the lamplight, layers falling soft, a reminder of the act that peeled back our guards. In this city, where lives brushed close but rarely touched deep, our bond had grown from those quiet services. Fixing a loose chain on her bike, sharing silence on benches watching the river muddle past. Care had been the thread, pulling us here without us noticing. We talked then about practicalities, voices measured against the night's deepening. The interview Monday, she said, lifting her head slight to meet my eyes, city lights reflecting in hers like distant stars over water. I need to nail it, get steady again. But after, maybe we figure us out slow. Dinner's here, more walks, blending without rushing. I squeezed her arm, the plan grounding like roots in thin soil. Next steps in the small city meant navigating its confines carefully. Her job hunt pushing against closed doors, my freelance gigs scattered like leaves in wind. We blend lives gradual, starting with shared shifts at the market, her picking up hours if the warehouse called back, me tagging along to the outskirts parks for sketches. No big moves, just folding in. Her key on my ring someday, my clothes in her drawer over time. Slow works, I replied, watching the lights flicker below, cars sloshing through puddles. This place doesn't give easy, but we take the paths we know. Her hand found mine again, calluses rough against my skin, the touch affirming the pace, steady, like clearing a trail one step at a time. The emotional payoff settled deep then, the bird in my chest quieting full, its frantic flaps replaced by a steady warmth that spread through my ribs, anchoring low in my gut. It wasn't flight anymore, that wild pull I'd felt on the drive over or during the cuts, but a rooted calm, like sun warming earth after frost. Her head returned to my shoulder, breath sinking with mine, and I felt it bloom, years of watching from afar resolving into this, her nearness no longer a distant ache, but a tangible heat. The small city's isolation, its streets that hemmed you in, faded against her weight, the warmth filling the hollows I'd carried alone. Feels like home now, I whispered. Not to the room, but to her, the words slipping easy. She hummed agreement, fingers tightening in mine. The payoff not in words, but in the quiet hold. The way care had turned to this unshakable steadiness. But challenges loomed, foreshadowed in the flicker of lights outside, the rain's soft reminder of storms that passed but left mud. People will talk, she said after a beat, voice threading worry through the calm. The city knows too much. Neighbors spotting us together more, whispers at the grocery about the layoff turning to something else. I felt the truth of it. The outside judgments like weeds choking paths, eyes at the bus stop narrowing on two women leaning close. Conservative edges to this place, where bonds like ours drew stares, not celebrations. Job apps overlooked for less, walks in parks cut short by sidelong glances. But shared strength endured, I knew, forged in the same soil. Let them, I said, arm pulling her closer. We've handled worse. The layoff, the isolation. Together, it sticks. Her laugh came soft, vibrating against me, dry and knowing, like acknowledging the wind but standing firm. We weren't naive. The test would come. Prying questions at work, the slow grind of blending amid the grind. But our resilience held. Roots intertwined now, bending but not breaking. The act ended with that quiet embrace. Her head nestled deeper on my shoulder, hands intertwined loose but sure on the cushion between us. The future stretched open yet anchored. City lights below mapping unknowns, but our hold mapping the sure path. Rain eased to nothing, night settling full. And I watched her silhouette against the window. New hair framing her profile, strong lines softened in repose. It faded then to the conclusion, that image lingering like a promise in the dark. Sunlight filtered through the blinds next morning, slanting gold across the living room floor, catching the edges of her hair where it spilled dark over the couch arm. We'd dozed tangled there, her head on my chest, breaths deep and synced through the night's quiet. The small city stirred outside, distant horns, a truck rumbling past. But inside, the air held still, warm from our bodies pressed close. I shifted first, careful not to wake her, but her eyes fluttered open, dark and soft in the light, meeting mine with that mirrored vulnerability from the bathroom. No words yet, just the lean of her shoulder into me, a subtle touch affirming the shift, fingers brushing my wrist as she stretched. We moved to the kitchen slow, her bare feet padding on the linoleum, my boots kicked off by the door. Coffee brewed strong, the pot gurgling like the river after thaw, steam rising to mingle with the faint pine from last night's shampoo still clinging to her skin. I poured 2 mugs, handing hers with a linger, our fingers touching, deliberate now, glances holding longer than before. Electric, but easy. She sipped, leaning against the counter, new layers framing her face, catching sun like river reeds after rain. "Smells better than yesterday," she said, voice rough from sleep, a half smile pulling at her lips. The touch came again, her hand on my arm as she reached for sugar, warmth seeping through, grounding the morning in this new rhythm. Resilience filled my thoughts then, internal and steady, as we sat at the table scarred from years of solitary meals. The small city tested, job doors slamming shut, streets that hemmed you in with prying eyes. But our connection held, roots dug deep in the concrete cracks. Her plan to job hunt renewed, eyes sharper now, scanning the listings on her phone. "Warehouse might call back," she said, voice gaining edge. "Or that shop on Elm." My support layered thicker with love, not just words, but the way I'd sit beside her through the calls, hand on her knee under the table. "We'll hit it together," I replied, meaning the markets, the walks, the slow weave of us into the grind. Laughter broke then, light and sudden, over the uneven ends I'd left near her temple, a fringe crooked from my unsteady snips. She ran fingers through it, tilting her head playful. "Looks like a bad windstorm hit." We chuckled, the sound easing the last knots, planning a professional fix once money loosened. "Soon," she said, eyes locking mine, the theme solidifying. Seeing oneself in another's eyes. That true revelation stripping walls, leaving only the steady hold. It led straight to the emotional close, her silhouette turning in the doorway light. She turned in the doorway that afternoon, sun catching her new profile, eyes holding mine with quiet promise, the small city's hum fading behind us. If this quiet truth resonates, share your story below and subscribe for more.